What's going on, everyone? This is your guest host this week, Jason. Blake big timed us this week. He's been coming through with these great graphics, these great Power Rankings podcast, and he said, I have a job, I have a career, I have a profession, I have an education. I cannot take control of the Power Rankings this week. So sometimes you got to step up and make sure the content keeps flowing. So congrats on the job, Blake. We'll hopefully get you back next week unless you big time us once again. You can see on your screen the Week 7 scores. So we had the Piss Boys beating the Chain Gang, the Zorillas beating the Gibbs Sons, the Hippos beating the Baby Bears, the Booty Pebbles beating the Nutcrackers, and the Father of the Mags beating Hottie Toddy. But we'll dive into the Power Rankings, and we're not going to have the fancy graphics. We're pretty bare bones, but what we will have is the good educational fantasy content of the Weekend Egg League. So starting off, number 10, remaining at number 10, it's going to be Hottie Toddy. Lost last week to Jimmy, 134-112. You know, that Patrick Mahomes, Tyreek Hill stack looks really good until the Chiefs are not a playoff caliber team. So I think combined less than 20 points from Mahomes and Hill, you can say they might just be in comeback mode and maybe they're going to be letting up a lot of points and be throwing a lot, which could be good for them, but they did not look good last week against the Titans. For a 0 RB build, the Hottie Toddy has run pretty well on running backs. Fournette is the RB1 or RB10 on the year, and he picked up Booker, who's been serviceable without Barkley, and he's been starting Dale Williams, who he picked up without Edwards-Helaire. But the wide receivers on this team have not come through. Metcalf is wide receiver 8 on the year. It might not feel like it. His volume's been a little bit low, especially without Russell Wilson. Jacoby Myers has been really good this year, just no touchdowns, which really hurts his fantasy score week to week. He's got Laviska, who's been good this year, but not good enough, I think, for a winning fantasy team. And, Julio Jones here in the IR, always injured. So really need that Mahomes Hill stack to come back for Hottie Toddy if they want to move up. But they play I won't tell you the number yet, but they play the Nutcrackers this week. So could be a way to get up from 2-5 and on to 3-5 as they try to make playoffs for the first time since, I believe, 2016. We'll move on to number 9. We got the Gibbs Sons holding on at number 9. They had a good performance last week. They lost 155-145 to the Zorillas. And I think the most difficult part of their season is probably over. It should be on the up and up from them, and they should be a pretty good 2-5 team from the looks of their roster. They have Dalvin Cook and Kamara both past their bye weeks, so we should have them together throughout the rest of the year, health concerns aside. But Kamara looked really good last week. I believe the RB1 on the week on that Monday Night Football game. He'll hopefully get Michael Thomas back at some point this season, and he really needs some wide receiver help. He has Thielen, Sutton, and Mike Evans. Mike Evans is going to be in trouble this week against Marshawn Lattimore. We'll see how he holds off, but he's got a lot of good running backs for his flex now. It was early in the year he had no flex option and struggling with Dalvin Cook's injuries, but now he's got Elijah Mitchell, Myles Gaskins, who should be going up with Malcolm Brown going on IR. He's also got Jeff Wilson Jr., who always is good for a couple weeks late in the year. So I think things altogether are going to be on the up and up for the number 9 Gibbs Sons. They play the Bebop and Baby Bears this week. They also have Khalil Herbert on the bench, and I think he's going to have a role the rest of the way. So a lot of good flex options for a team that's not too deep at wide receiver. So I expect they're going to make a playoff push here late in the year, but they need a lot of things to go good with their running back core. On to number 8, the Nutcrackers lost a tough one last week to the Booty Pebbles, 129-123. Pretty much all of his running backs were on bye last week. He had no Eckler, he had no Harris, no James Robinson, and so we only had Swift at running back, and I believe Chase Edmonds, who is now traded away. A lot of issues with some questionable management decisions, some would say. Darren Waller was ruled out last minute. Sterling Shepard ruled out Sunday morning. Both were questionable, I think, Saturday night. So things didn't work out too well, and they'd already had benched Tim Patrick, who it looks like he shockingly has dropped his boy Tim Patrick. And also Odell, who played on Thursday. They both were benched. With a bunch of players on bye that he couldn't drop on his bench, he had no flex play for the week. So he eventually dropped his defense, picked up a flex option in his boy B-Eds, who was a good pickup. But then he didn't have a defense. So going into Monday night, it was, I believe, Marquez Callaway against Lockett. He was down maybe 20 points. He makes a trade of Chase Claypool for Saints D to try to get a win, not wanting to fall to 2-5, and he falls to 2-5. Callaway did not really do it for him. Had a bunch of long receptions called back, so could have easily flipped the other way with Lockett really not doing anything for the Booty Pebbles. But past the buys, traded away Eckler for Ridley last week, so he's got a little better running back situation, and traded Edmonds for Pittman. So things look a little bit better for their wide receiver core, especially if Kadarius Toney can come back healthy. Ridley, Pittman, and Toney would be a pretty good receiving group for what they kind of compared to what they started the season with. So 2-5 though, it's going to be hard to come back from that, being 4th of 5 in a strong division that's 6-1 at the top. So we'll see how things kind of come together, but most of these guys are past their bye week for the Nutcrackers, so should be a little better moving forward, but we'll see how it goes. Moving on to number 7, the Booty Pebbles. They hold strong at number 7 last week, edging out a win that we just talked about against the Nutcrackers, and they just keep putting together some wins. They're 1st of 5 in the Black Division, but I don't know if they would be regarded as a feared team in this league. They've improved the depth on their bench. Their bench is a little better from running backs that wouldn't even matter with an injury that we saw a couple weeks ago that was highly criticized by the league. Chubb was out last week, and just kind of finding a way to win has been the move of the Booty Pebble so far this year. But really needs Gibson to hold strong. I honestly would be surprised if Gibson would make it through the whole season, but he's got McKissick behind him. Chubb will be back this week. He's got Chuba for a couple more weeks, and just kind of needs this main core of his top end of his roster to hold strong. Still riding Joe Burrow despite all the negative things that have been said about him in the offseason. Seems like the Booty Pebbles and Burrow and the Bengals have mended that relationship. Also, they're down to only rostering 3 Washington football team running backs, as Jarrett Patterson has gotten the axe from the Booty Pebbles. So out of fab, so it might be a long way home. I don't know why you would spend all of it and not save a buck or two. But we'll see how he manages waivers on a kind of a thin team with no fab left the rest of the way. They play the Chain Gang this week, which is always a fun matchup between Trevor and Mark. So we will move on to number 6. So we're Bebop and Baby Bears. The normal host of the power rankings drops from, I believe, number 2 to number 6, if I'm correct, maybe 3. It's hard to do math on the fly. But yeah, down 2 spots from number 4. I'm sorry I had it written out. We prep for the show. We just don't read the prep. But they lost their 3rd straight game last week to the Cardboard Hippos. 42-point victory. Things are struggling for the Bebop and Baby Bears. They've got Eckler now, so once they get Christian McCaffrey back, running back looks good with McCaffrey, Mixon, and Eckler. These receivers are the issue. You've got one wide receiver in the top 25, and it's Emmanuel Sanders, who, look at his game log, probably all came from like a single game. He's been okay. So he's been better than I thought, but I don't know if he's the consistent top 25 receiver that he would need here. But Amari Cooper's been struggling lately. A.J. Green, I don't know how he's in the NFL currently, but he does amazing things every week. And then Marvin Jones, the Baby Bears boy, always on the Baby Bears roster. He's got Corey Davis, who's going to be probably struggling with Mike White. So really is kind of going to be in a RB-heavy build with Brady and Kyle Pitts being elite positional players. So wide receivers can come along. It could be back on the upswing for the Baby Bears, but they've seemed to be falling every week and look to avoid their 4th straight loss this week as they play the Gibbs Sons, who look to have a good team this week. So we'll see what the Baby Bears can do. Hope the work trip went well. Sorry that he abandoned us, but he'll be back next week. All right, we'll move on to number 5, the Chain Gang. And the new happily married Chain Gang, congratulations, Trevor and Darian, on your wedding and your marriage last weekend. I hope you're having a good time on your honeymoon, but there are important things to discuss here. Lost last week to the Piss Boys, and I think just an off week for the team. I don't see any wild concerns with his core. I mean, Derrick Henry had a good week and just didn't rush for any touchdowns. Kind of hurt the upside. The Chiefs had a bad week. Kelsey wasn't playing well, obviously, with a bad week. And Antonio Brown missed the week with a late scratch, which might have made the difference in a win versus a loss last week. Struggling with receiver depth, I would say, is the main key issue for the Chain Gang. They were number 1 for 2 weeks in a row. Now they're down to 5, so they did fall 4 spots. The curse of number 1 seed is going on again. But they're going to have 3, what I would say, RB1s with Kareem Hunt off IR later in the year, assuming he comes back in full health and assumes the same role. He's got Henry and Cordero Patterson, who is the RB9 on the season. I can't believe that's a factual thing I've had to say out loud today. But that's the case, and that's the world we live in. He's the RB1 for the Falcons, who are struggling to have any productivity this year. Allen Robinson, I can't believe he's been this bad this year. I don't know if Robinson's got any upside at this point in the year, but just kind of needs to get this team healthy and kind of get the depth back. And I think they'll be a likely team in the playoffs at the end of the year, just kind of with the stars that this team has in Henry and Kelsey, Cordero Patterson, and Lamar Jackson. So they play Booty Pebbles this week. So big rivalry as the Chain Gang comes back from the honeymoon later in the week. All right, so we'll move on to number 4. Zal Zappy Zorillas. They are 3-4. I think 2 wins in a row for the Zappy Zorillas. And they put up the most points in the league last week, 155 to 145 against the Gibbs Sons, and what would say an elite fab bid on Dearness Johnson. He put up 28 points, I believe, in Thursday Night Football. 27 points. I don't know how many points. 24.8. Now I can read. And that was a really good start to the week. Cooper Kupp, 33.6 points. Every week with this guy, you can't beat him. Kupp and Samuel have been really big for him each week. Both pretty consistent, I would say, each in and out each week as high-end wide receiver ones. DJ Moore started the year really strong, and it was a good trio, but he kind of needs to bounce back here as the Panthers are struggling. His targets are still there. I think just QB play has kind of limited his week-to-week performances. So we see he's got Aaron Jones and Michael Carter as his running backs on his bench. He does have Barkley, who's likely back next week, not this week, and David Montgomery. I'd say really needs those two to come back in full force, and this is a pretty scary team for Zal Zappy Zorillas. They look to get that first playoff win this year, and I think they're on the right path. Just need everything to kind of be healthy the rest of the way. But, the same note, who doesn't need health for a good fantasy team? They will play the Father of the Mags this week in what should be a pretty tough matchup, but I think, if I remember correctly, Father of the Mags have a tough bye week situation this week. But speaking of them, we'll move on to number 3, Father of the Mags, the best record in the league, down to number 3 in the power rankings. And I'm not sure if there's any specific reason they fell. They lost Sanders. Adams is going to be out this week with COVID. The wide receiver group of Devontae Adams, Jamar Chase, and Mike Williams all are pretty much fringe top 5 plays, saying Mike Williams is wide receiver 9 on the week past his bye week. So really needs Mike Williams to kind of continue his early season success. Was it a flash in the pan? We've seen this before from Mike Williams, so let's see how he comes back and if he can stay healthy the rest of the way. Jamar Chase, the wide receiver 2 on the year, ahead of Devontae Adams. I mean, he couldn't catch NFL-sized football, but now, I mean, he's doing pretty good out there. But yeah, really strong receiving group, and kind of as we said before the season, it was going to really rely on these wide receivers being good, and they've really come to fruition early in the year. It's going to be tough without Adams this week, but it should be a good game with them. And the Zorillas traded Michael Pittman for Chase Edmonds this week, but I think that was just more of a situation of they really need running backs for the next couple weeks with Sanders down and players going on bye. They're pretty thin. Also, Chris Carson down here on the IR, who he should possibly get back late in the season. I'm not really sure, but just kind of needs some production from running backs. So I think that is why we see this Chase Edmonds move. And he's got Kyler, who's been great, and a consistent QB every week. So yeah, 6-1. We'll see if they can go to 7-1 against the Zorillas this week. So I would say a shocking development from number 2 seed, the Piss Boys. So they're 3-4 with not really like an impressive win last week, just kind of probably luck of the other the opponent not doing too hot in a bad week. But 101 points gets the job done without a defense. So a good week for the Piss Boys despite kind of a bye-apocalypse. No Stephon Diggs, no CeeDee Lamb, no Dak Prescott, no defense or kicker. So it was pretty thin last week, but you got to win those games. But things look like they were pretty down early in the year, but A.J. Brown's bounced back the last 2 weeks. Hopkins has been pretty consistent each week, scoring touchdowns, and then Diggs and CeeDee Lamb, after a slower start, are kind of coming back to pace of what they were expected to be. Darrell Henderson has been really productive for the Piss Boys at the running back spot. Really just need him to kind of last the duration of the year as a low-end RB1, and this build kind of works out. Also struggling a little bit at tight end, Ricky Seals-Jones trying to hold strong till George Kittle comes back, but pretty much need to keep the RBs somewhat productive, similar to Father of the Mags. And yeah, I mean, the receivers are pretty deep. I mean, Hopkins, A.J. Brown, Diggs, Lamb, Judy, T. Higgins, Chase Claypool. I think some teams would like Higgins, Chase Claypool, and Judy as their starting 3 wide receivers each week. So sometimes you got to hold the depth wide receivers so no one else can have them. You got to starve the beast. So it looks like that's what the Piss Boys are doing here. But up to number 2 after being number 5 last week. Not sure why the 101 points last week really put the Piss Boys back on everyone's radar, but they play the Cardboard Hippos this week, so it should be a tough matchup there for the Piss Boys. Speaking of them, game of the week consideration, Cardboard Hippos and Piss Boys, also against the other game of the week opponent in the Zorillas and Father of the Mag. So put it in the comments who is the game of the week for this week. We're not sure if Wolfie is sponsoring it or if it is the Pikachu Bowl that we saw last week. So looking for a sponsor for that game also. If you have a sponsor, put them in the comments. But moving up to number 1, I believe for the first time this season, Cardboard Hippos. I mean, 144 points last week, and I believe pretty much a lot of their receivers are on bye. I don't think they didn't have Keenan, Deontay, Jefferson, Allen, Schultz. So kind of shows the depth of the Hippos. And yeah, I mean, no one on this bench except for Robbie and Justin Tucker. Well, I guess Justin Tucker's kicker too, so he can't drop the kicker too. But yeah, pretty deep squad here. Jonathan Taylor was a smash for him in the second round to pair with Zeke, 2 top 5 running backs so far on the year. So, I mean, that's been really good production each week for the Hippos. And when you hit on the running backs and hit on the early receivers, I mean, it's really hard to not have a good team with the top quarterback on the year. So, yeah, I mean, Keenan Allen, I think, is the only player in his starting lineup that's really been bothering him each week. He's done well. I mean, averaging 11.6 a game, not bad, but you just aren't getting the same target volume that you spent for Keenan Allen. But, I mean, as his wide receiver 2 or 3 with strong running backs, I don't think it's Too big of a deal. He's got Marquise Brown, who's been crushing this year, on bye this week. So yeah, I mean, really strong team. I mean, and really deep team for the Hippos. Only one thing to note, Dalton Schultz has been the tight end 6 through the first 7 weeks, including his bye week, so probably even top 4 or 5 on the season. But he was not great week 1 before Gallup got hurt. Once Gallup got hurt, he was kind of like the funnel option. Gallup's coming back this week or next week. So it'll be interesting to see if he is still a viable week-to-week tight end play with Gallup back in the mix. Just another elite receiver to kind of soak up a lot of the targets for the Cowboys, who have been pretty much spreading the ball around throughout the year. So yeah, I mean, an interesting fab bid for the Cardboard Hippos to note this week was Robbie Anderson for $6. Some could say it's a homer move, but I don't know when Robbie Anderson's going to be in the starting rotation for his receivers, especially because they're all going to be past their bye. I mean, these targets are nuts, but he's not doing anything with them. So, I don't know. Interesting to see that's where they spend their coveted fab on early in the year. But that'll be it for this week in terms of the power rankings. So these are the standings through 7 weeks. While the Mags have a stranglehold on the top of the white division and the league at 6-1. Then the Hippos, Booty Pebbles sit at 5-2, and then Chain Gang would have the 4 seed currently at 4-3, and then a lot of teams at 3-4 over in the black division. So the teams at the bottom, if they could lose the next couple weeks, could kind of fall out of the playoff race. But things are still pretty tight across the Weekend Dads League as we get pretty much at the halfway point in the season. So here's your matchups this week before we head out. Piss Boys against the Hippos, Bebop and Baby Bears against the Gibbs Sons, Booty Pebbles against the Chain Gang, Hottie Toddy against the Nutcrackers, and the Zorillas against Father of the Mags. So please be sure to like, comment, and subscribe. Corporate is yelling at me in the background to make sure we get a bunch of likes. We need 10 likes on this video for 10 members of the Weekend Dads. But thank you all for tuning in. We'll see you next week.